Welcome to the CBT Dive, a vodcast that goes into the lives of real people with real struggles. Each episode welcomes a new guest who wants to explore a challenging situation using the most common cognitive behavioral therapy tool, the thought record. Your host, Raheem Thawa, is a social worker and psychotherapist based in Toronto and well known for his work in LGBTQ communities. He's created the CBT Dive to demystify what therapy can look like and share intervention skills for wellness. We hope that each episode helps you along on your own journey for insight and self-compassion.
Welcome to another episode of the CBT Dive. Today, I've got Joash with me. Joash is a 42-year-old sales professional working in the global workforce mental health field. He is based in Johannesburg, South Africa, and regularly travels worldwide, working with businesses looking to implement mental health care programming. Joash navigates life as a single, cisgender, gay man, a relatively new relationship status after a 13-year committed relationship. But after 3 years of being single, with a rather adventurous dating lifestyle or life, he feels like he is ready for a serious commitment once more. So we're joined by Joash today, who is going to explore the experience of being ghosted. Joash, how are you today?
I'm good, Raheem. How are you?
I'm good. Now, from what I understand, you have heard of CBT, but you've never done a CBT exercise quite like this. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. I've never been, well, I guess to some extent, but not in a comprehensive manner that we're about to do that today.
And how does it feel for you to talk about things that are so personal for the first time, and in this kind of way where you're going to examine your own thoughts in a very vulnerable way? What does that feel like for you?
There's a level of anxiety, but I think what gives me courage to move through the anxiety is that I know that there'll be people who will see this and who'll be able to learn from it and be able to take things away that will help them. And that makes me okay with this. And I think it's always good to be vulnerable. And I know I'm in a safe space. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay. I appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Can you see that thought record up on the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay. We both can. That's always good. Okay. So Joash, what we're starting with here is a situation that brings up difficult feelings for you, okay? And that situation is this moment, and I know it's not just one moment, it probably happens over the course of a couple of hours, where you realize that you've been ghosted because the texting pattern with this person, who we're going to call Ellie, has changed and he's stopped responding.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you want to share about the particular situation or the moments when you realized you'd been ghosted?
Yeah. So let me give you some context and some background to this. So
Sure.
I had met Eddie on one of the dating apps, and he wasn't particularly my type. And, having said that, I don't really have a type, but I know when I'm not into someone, and I wasn't particularly into him. And he had texted me, and also he was not even on my grid. So he found me somehow. But anyway, he was polite and he was engaging and he was entertaining. So we're like, okay, there's nothing to lose. So we chatted for a bit. And then I think he suggested, he'd like to meet. So we did meet and he came over to my place. And when he came over, again, still physically not really my type, but intellectually we had a really great time. Like, we connected on so many levels. He made me laugh in a way that many people don't generally do. And because I felt this connection and this strong chemistry with him, on that night when we met, it also became physical, which neither of us were expecting and anticipating on that night. And in the run up to that first meeting, there was very frequent texting between the two of us. And he was very responsive. So if I texted, he'd reply fairly quickly. If he replied, I'm always usually responsive with my messages. So yeah, I would reply. And so we had some great banter over text. And then
Yes.
we scheduled a second date.
Mhm.
And in the run up to the second date, I could see that the texting patterns had changed, but he did give some context to why it had changed. He said that he had a family event. And so I took that at face value and I was okay with that. And then we met, had that second date. It was dinner and a movie. And throughout the dinner and movie, it was pretty good. But I could also sense during dinner that something had changed, shifted a little. But I just thought that maybe I was reading into things a little too much. Because when we sat down at the movies, we were cuddling and kissing and all of those things. So I thought,
Sorry,
I was
Joash.
definitely. Mhm.
Sorry. The movies was date 2, is that right?
That's right. Dinner and a movie was date 2.
Okay. So the ghosting, and so the texting pattern changed between date 1 and 2 or after date 2?
That's right. Between date 1 and 2, the pattern had already changed, but he substantiated that with saying that he had some family stuff going on. He had
I
a
see.
family get together at his place. And so it made it legitimate that there's going to be a change and a slowdown because he had stuff going on. And he also
Okay.
had a friend who was visiting from another city, from Cape Town, who
Right.
was staying with him for the weekend. So it was all fairly legitimate and
It
completely
made
above
sense.
board.
Yes.
And so it made sense, yeah. But on that second date with the dinner and the movie, I could sense like he was he was effusive with his attraction to me. He's like constantly told me how much he thought that that he found me attractive. And that in the second date had also changed. Like he stopped telling me that he thought that I was so attractive any longer. And but then that was during dinner, and at the movie, there was the cuddling and the kissing and the making out at the movie. So again, I thought, no, this is just in my head.
Mm.
And he had picked me up from my place for the second date. And so he dropped me off. And when he dropped me off, he declined to come in. He just dropped me off at the
Mhm.
gate and he declined to come in. And, again, I thought, okay, maybe the guy's just tired. He's had a busy weekend and that's
Mhm.
okay. And after that,
Mhm.
then there was further lulls in the texting conversation. And again, he gave reasons for that. He was busy with work. And I think so that dinner and movie was either on a Saturday or Sunday. And I think the Monday and Tuesday we texted. And then by the Wednesday or Thursday, there was radio silence. I texted and say, hey, how are you? Is everything okay? And no response. And no response to this day. And we're talking about 4 months later. And, I thought maybe he'd blocked me, and he didn't because I could still see his profile picture on his messaging
Mhm.
app. My messages were being delivered, so he did not block me, but it was a pure situation. It was a situation of just being ghosted. And I think maybe about a month later, I had just sent him like a forwarded message, like, just a random meme or something, and no response even to that. And so,
Mhm.
yeah, here we are a good few months later, and that was the trajectory of that. Now, the thing that was so frustrating is that I never even found the guy physically attractive, but I fell into something with his personality. And I thought, like, oh my
Yes.
God, this guy is the kind of person that while I don't find him physically attractive, like there's something here that I could work with. And so to be ghosted by someone that I didn't even find physically attractive was like hella infuriating.
Mm.
Um, but it was also the potential of what could have been, because this is someone that I felt there could be substance here. And that
Okay.
physicality, we all know, is fleeting because it's not what you build a foundation on.
Sure. Okay, I'm going to pause you there. That context was beautiful. And as you began to talk about the rationale for why things were frustrating or infuriating, what you see the foundation of a relationship being, those are all really important things that I think we're gonna come back to. So the Wednesday after date 2, and you discover the radio silence, you felt frustrated, infuriated. What were the other feelings you were experiencing?
So yeah, frustrated, infuriated, angry with myself. Angry with myself for falling for someone that was not. And again, I keep saying this physical type thing because I believe to an extent it is bullshit. I think that we can build a connection with anyone that we have a cerebral connection with, regardless of the physicality. My belief is that we're conditioned into having physical types. And so I try as much as possible to not veer towards this physical type. But having said that, he was not someone that I would typically find myself dating physically. And so I found myself being angry that I started feeling attraction to someone I generally would have walked past.
Okay, so when you
Level.
allow yourself to do something you wouldn't normally do, you're entering into a kind of connection, encounter, relationship. You're embarking on something that you wouldn't normally do. You're in a way you're taking. It's like a social risk, and when you take a risk, and you get a slap in the face, I'm trying to figure out what the feeling there would be. Would it be like a kind of embarrassment, or would it be a deeper sense of rejection? What are the feelings that come with that? So I get that you're a bit angry with yourself, but then are you embarrassed or exposed? What are the other feelings? Taken
I wouldn't
advantage
call
of?
it yeah, possibly taken advantage of. I wouldn't call it being embarrassed though. It was, I always say this to myself, trust your instinct. And I felt that in that moment in time, I didn't trust my instinct. I was taken with I was flattered by how much he found me attractive, in his words. And it strokes your ego. So it's almost like I was driven by my ego in that moment, and then my ego let me down, or my ego reminded me that ego doesn't serve you.
Okay. When
And I
your
think
ego,
that
sorry, when your ego, okay, so instead of taken advantage of, I just used the word used. It's a bit shorter, of course. When you talk about the bruising of the ego, I'm trying to figure out what feeling words could be attached to that. And again, my mind is going to embarrassed or discouraged, but I'm not sure. So help me out here. When your ego was bruised, what kinds of feelings were happening for you?
I would say that it could be frustration,
Okay.
which I've said. I'm hesitant to say embarrassed, and the reason why is because
Why?
I'm someone who doesn't embarrass easily, or if I do get embarrassed, I recover quite quickly from that. I've considered myself over the years to be resilient, and so embarrassment is not something that exists within my orbit, within my vocabulary,
Okay.
because
So
I
you
like
don't
laughing
like,
at myself, as an
okay.
example.
But Joash, it
Mhm.
seems like you're talking about how you protect yourself
Mhm.
against something that um, you don't like to feel, or you like to
Mhm.
jump quickly to being resilient, but there is a space in between being ghosted and bouncing back that we have to acknowledge. So would you
Yeah.
say that you experience embarrassment to a small degree?
I would say it's despair,
Despair.
if I had to
Okay.
think. Mhm.
Okay. I'm going to leave embarrassed there, but I recognize that despair is one of the more prominent words. I also want to ask
Mhm.
if there was sadness.
Sadness and despair, yeah. To me, those go
Yes.
hand in hand.
Okay. And would you say that um, you also were feeling like, did you feel a solid sense of rejection? Because I know you talked about, oh, there's so many reasons why maybe he didn't come in that day or his texting pattern changed. Did you personally feel rejected? Like he doesn't like me?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
without a doubt. Because if you think about it, if I have to think about it rather,
Hmm.
something had to have happened, right? Either it was a reaction to something I've said, a reaction to who I am on any
Mm,
kind of level, whether it was he was looking for this, masculine Adonis, and here I am with this, very femme uh, personality and being, and that was not aligned with what he wanted. I don't know. I still don't know what I was rejected for. And so it's the despair and sadness of the rejection. And of course, the
yes.
nature of ghosting is that you don't have an opportunity to ask the question. You don't have
Yes.
closure to it. You're really just thrown in the garbage bin.
Yes.
And so, I don't mind being rejected because I know a huge part of life is failure. A huge part of life is rejection, and you learn from that, right? Because that's what failure does, is it sets you up for the next activity, and you learn from those mistakes.
But if
And
you're not
so
given any
ghosting,
feedback, but if you're not given any
right,
feedback and there's no
right,
closure, no conversation, it's not about improvement. It's just
right,
about the rejection on its
right,
own. So I want to go back to a moment ago
right.
where you said the thoughts that went through your mind were about like, am I too femme or do I not meet his ideal?
Mhm.
I wonder if the feeling there is about around inferiority or inadequacy. Do you think, did you feel inadequate a little bit?
Um, I would say
Yep.
to an extent, inadequate, perhaps inferior, but also where do I fit into this gay dating scene, but also
Yes.
where do I fit into his world?
Yes. So
Because
confused.
I yeah, and I didn't have that opportunity to ask, especially since, and you mentioned confused, but that first date was just electric on so many levels. The chemistry
Mm,
was there and the banter was there, and we clicked on all of these different levels. Physically, mentally, socially, it was all just popping, honey. But fast forward to literally a week later, and
yes.
you've fallen off it, and you're given no notion, no insight into why that had happened. And so it was confusion, but it left me one. So the thing is, and I'm speaking here in terms of my experience, I guess because I'm at this phase of my life, I'm confident enough to not be knocked down by someone else's opinion of me. Everyone's got an opinion. I may not always agree with it. I may not always like it, but you're entitled to your opinion.
Mhm.
And also, I know that I'm never going to be liked by everyone, and I'm completely okay with that. But I know there are
Yeah.
people who truly love me. And that's something that gives me, it sustains me and gives me happiness and joy and all of those wonderful things that goes along with being loved and accepted. So being rejected by one person is not the be all and end all,
It's
but being
not.
rejected without, yeah, but being rejected with no recourse is where it becomes egregious on many levels.
Okay. Okay. So because you talk about the close people in your life and their love being of importance to you, and it seems like that's where what you build your resilience around. On the Wednesday
Mhm.
after date 2, when you experience this like radio silence, for a moment, were you feeling unworthy or were you questioning your worth for the moment?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Which is why the very first thing I did was log back onto the dating apps. Because if
Oh,
you fall off the horse,
so you were feeling determined and a bit vengeful as well.
well, I wouldn't call it vengeful, but now that you're saying it,
Yes. Okay.
that's kind of ring true because it's like,
Okay.
you motherfucker, I'm gonna show you I can get dick if I want to.
Yes. Yes. Okay.
Uh-huh.
And so determined, vengeful. Okay, this is good. This is good. So look, I want you to take a moment. It's hard because you're quite a resilient person. Um, and you've got the story uh, well articulated and laid out. So this exercise is going to disrupt the story a little bit because I want you to go back to the Wednesday after date 2 when you discovered the radio silence and help me with each of these feelings. I want you to rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of intensity. So 10 means it's quite intense on the Wednesday after date 2. 1 would be not intense at all. How would you rate frustration?
So do they all have to have a different rating scale, or can they all, like, as an example, can they all be a 10?
They could all be a 10, but I
Mhm.
would want you to consider each feeling differently in that particular moment, the Wednesday after date 2. So frustration.
Um, I would say that was probably a 7. And I'll tell you why. Because I had already in my mind started to build a future with this man. And yeah,
Ah,
because I thought, there could really be something here, and we could have something really solid. And you mentioned in my bio that I'd been in a long-term relationship. While my dating life is hella fun and adventurous, as you mentioned, I would like to have that gold standard of a relationship again. And that is what I'm looking for. So when I'm dating, I am dating with the outcome of a relationship.
yes.
If it falls short at just sex, I'm okay with that too. If it falls short of just dates, I'm okay with that. But in my mind, relationships are the gold standard, and it's
Mm.
something that I wanted. So frustration was high on that list.
Hi.
Yeah, yes,
Tell me,
because
that
Mhm,
context is very useful. And again,
mhm,
it'll be very important a bit later. So in the behavior column, I've already started to put like what was going on for you was thinking about the future you'd built up in your mind. Come back to the Wednesday
mhm.
after date 2 when you discover radio silence. How would you rate inferiority? Oh, sorry, being infuriated.
Infuriating. Um, I would say that
High
was
as
also
well.
pretty high. I would say that was probably at about an 8. Again, because like, how dare he?
And then
Does he
anger.
know who I am?
No,
Yeah.
he most certainly does not.
Also, yeah, I was pretty pissed off about
So
that.
was the anger also about
Um,
an 8?
Uh-huh.
Okay. And feeling used or taken advantage of. How would you rate that?
I wouldn't I wouldn't say that's high on that list, only because to an extent, I was complicit in it too, in that, we had a good physical time together. So I would say maybe that's a 6.
Okay. And embarrassed?
Again, because I don't embarrass easily, I would put that at perhaps a 4.
Okay. And despair?
Yeah, this was high because, it was, again, the future planner in me had that decimated at that point in time. So
Ah,
I
so
would
this would
say that would be about an 8.
8.
Mhm.
And sadness, would that also be an 8? Because you said sadness and despair go
Mhm.
hand in hand.
Agree.
And then the feeling of rejection.
Oh, I mean, that's a 10 because I mean, clearly I was rejected in that.
Yes. Feeling of inadequacy, like I'm not enough, or maybe I don't fit the aesthetic or whatever it is.
When I think of inadequacy, I am such a contradiction on this. And I'll completely own that I'm a contradiction on this because I know that we're a diverse community. I know that we should celebrate everything. But at the same time, I myself aspire to the textbook definition, whatever the fuck that may be,
Mhm.
of what a successful gay man is.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, and so inadequate, yes and no, because I know that I am worthy, but I also know that I fall short of many standards that gay men aspire to.
Okay. I'm going to pause you there for a moment.
And
I'm going to pause you there
mhm,
for a moment because what you're telling me now is it's really about how you've conceptualized and begun to cope with the difficulty of gay culture and gay community and the dating scene. And so we may get there, we may not, but
mhm,
allow yourself to own how the degree to which you felt inadequate in that moment.
mhm,
So the Wednesday afternoon, how would you rate that? Because it might be higher than you would like to believe, or it might be in the background.
mhm.
It might be like a 2 or a 3. I'm not sure. How would you rate
Yeah.
it?
You know, I would rate that at about a 4, to be honest, because I know that in comparison to Ellie, I was
Yes.
definitely adequate.
Okay.
I know
Okay.
that. Yeah,
And then confused, I imagine that was a bit high.
that was high. I would say that was a 10 because,
Okay.
like, what the fuck? All the signals were there that this was amazing. And then, yeah.
Yeah. And then unworthy, similar to inadequate, but slightly different. Um, how was your sense of worthiness?
I would say that's also at about a 4, maybe even a 5,
Oops. Yeah.
because, yeah, a 4, maybe even a 5. Um, you struggle with wondering, where did I fall short again? And so that feeling of unworthiness comes
Yes,
in.
of course. And then to what degree did you feel vengeful or and determined? So give me a rating of intensity for each one.
Oh, determined was the 10, honey. Because, like, my thing is, when you get off a horse, you got to get back on. And so determined was definitely a 10. Vengeful, I'd say, like, maybe subconsciously I'm vengeful, but generally I wouldn't call myself a vengeful person. But I'd say that's probably a 7 because, like, you know what, you
Good.
motherfucker, I'm going to do this anyway, with or without you.
Yes. And there's also, earlier when we were talking about being used, and I know that that word didn't quite fit. I wonder if a better word
Mhm.
would be deceived. Did you feel like you were deceived?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a good word.
And because when we feel deceived, so if we have a physical connection with somebody and we're vulnerable and then they ghost us, I can see how we feel inadequate or unworthy. If
Mhm.
we are spending time with somebody and we think that they like us and then they're gone somehow, excuse me, I think it's not so much that we're unworthy, but it's like we've been tricked in some way. And so
Mhm.
how would you
Oh yeah.
rate your level of deception that you experienced?
Now that you've labeled that, I would say that was very high because he had led me on to believe that he was just so enamored with me. And then to go from literally a week later to having zero communication, that's deception,
Yes.
plain and
And
simple. And so I would put that at like a 10.
okay. So bear with me a moment. I'm gonna I'm gonna reorganize some of the feelings. Um, and this is actually one of the benefits of moving to therapy online because I've never used to do this in person, but I found
Mhm.
that it can be quite useful to just take all the feelings that are rated as 9 and 10 and put them together because it paints a slightly different picture of what's been going on.
Mhm.
So I'll just be a moment here. Now, as you look at this feelings list, especially as I'm rearranging it, my question to you is, do new feelings come up that you feel like you might have forgotten? Or is there new insight here in looking at the range of feelings that you didn't have before? Is listing and identifying the feelings in and of itself helpful?
Yeah, so listing the feelings is incredibly helpful because I like to think that I'm a mindful person and that I'm self-aware, but I've never done that on this type of level and this scale. And to see this in front of my eyes is pretty insightful and useful in a way that I've not done before.
Okay, so the feelings that got the highest ratings were deceived, rejected, confused, determined.
Mhm.
And the most painful ones are probably deceived and rejected, and then confused is a bit neutral, and determined
Mhm.
we would see that as positive. So
Mhm.
it's not a surprise to me that deceived got lost earlier because there's so many strong feelings, and some overshadow others. And then you have your second set of difficult feelings. And I think those are um, maybe some of the more painful ones: infuriated, anger, despair, sadness. And then we go down a notch: vengeful, frustration, used, unworthy, inadequate, and embarrassed. So now, Joash, Wednesday after date 2, you discover the radio silence, you're feeling this range of emotions. One of the things you did in terms of your behavior was go back onto the dating apps, right? The
Mhm.
other thing you're doing is you're also thinking about the future you'd built up in your mind with this person. So you're
Mhm.
reflecting a bit on where you let your imagination go. In terms of behavior, is there anything else you did? So some people, I ask about behavior, it's a bit tricky because it's not what you were thinking. It's more like, did I go for a jog? Did I start drinking? Did I go back onto the dating app? Did I um, send a bunch of angry messages? That kind of thing.
Yeah. So immediate behaviors would be telling my friends and say, can you believe the nerve of this fucking asshole who's just ghosted me?
Yes.
So there was that. And
So
wanting to
seeking
just
some
get back into the
validation.
seeking that, yeah.
Yeah.
And probably the bigger aspect of seeking validation was getting back onto the dating apps because, again, I was determined to not let this be a speed bump on my road to finding a relationship. So just getting back on and finding someone else that I can find a connection with.
Okay.
Those were the
Now,
immediate behaviors. Mhm.
okay. And when you think about, when you earlier, one of the first feelings you came up with was anger, and you said anger toward myself. And so I'm thinking that anger and feeling deceived there's a connection between those two, because it's not just I was deceived or I feel deceived, I've been tricked, but there's a piece of you that says I let myself be deceived.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
in your mind, when you say I feel deceived, I feel anger, what are you thinking? What's the thought there?
Um, that I allowed myself to get into that situation against my better judgment. So going back to what I mentioned earlier, my instinct is that I would have walked past this guy had I seen him on the street and not really paid him any attention. And
Mhm.
my friends tease me in that I find 90% of men hot. He's not in the 90%. So
Joash, we can tell the audience I am that friend who teases you. Anytime we're together, I'm like, oh my gosh, Joash finds this guy
He's
hot.
so hot.
What a surprise. Like, okay, he's in the top 90%. Groundbreaking. Okay.
He's he's not, but he's not in the 90%.
So look, I think when it comes to confusion, there's confusion about what happened, but I think there's also confusion around um, your approach to dating. It throws you it throws you for a loop in a way, because on the one hand, you say, you lead with physical attraction when you first meet somebody, and then you also think that
Mhm.
physical attraction doesn't have to be completely important. And I wonder if
Agreed.
it
And that
confuses you a bit.
it so it does. So
Yeah.
there's two sides of that, right? So I think physical attraction is key to igniting something. That's the Tinder,
Okay.
for lack of a better word.
Yes.
Physical attraction is the Tinder that gets us into wanting to start a conversation. But physical attraction fades incredibly quickly if there's no substance behind that. And the substance being a cerebral connection, the substance being alignment of values, the substance being wanting the same, having the same aspirations or similar aspirations in life, because those are the building blocks and the foundations for something that is sustainable as a relationship. And so while you may have physicality as the Tinder, it does
Mhm.
not sustain something long term. And so that's why I always, yeah, I'm attracted to you. I think you're hot, but if you're vapid or you're not aligned to who I am, this is not going to go anywhere beyond a hookup or flirtation or whatever the case is.
Okay. So thank you for
Mhm.
that. There's a lot of good material here that we're going to have to circle back to. When you felt, now I have a sense of why you felt deceived and what the thought is that's connected to that. Tell me about the thought that was connected to feeling rejected inadequate, and unworthy. Because even though those have different ratings, I would group them together in terms of similarity of emotion. So when you felt rejected, what was going on in your mind? And you alluded to this earlier about being femme and not being the Adonis, etc. But spell it out for me here. What was going on in your mind? I'm not, or
so I tried to be pragmatic about this. And so let me tell you the pragmatic side first.
no, don't be
Pragmatic side is
pragmatic. Actually, I want you to not be pragmatic. I want you to go right into, because when you're being pragmatic, I'll be honest with you, because I know you, when you're being pragmatic, there's a lot of work going into
avoiding.
not just avoiding, but making sure you're not misunderstood and that I have a picture of your overall way of thinking. It's really important to you that I know that you're realistic and that you're resilient, even though your heart was broken, right? And so in this session, I want you to know that I get that. I hear you. You are pragmatic. You are resilient. And in this moment, you were feeling pain. So tell me, let's go deeper into the pain. So you felt rejected, unworthy. Tell me about the thoughts that are connected to rejection and unworthiness.
So let me give you some other context that I didn't mention to you.
Yes.
So Ellie is a white man who has a penchant for brown men like myself. Now, and his previous relationship, he was in a committed relationship too. I can't remember how long, but it was a long-term relationship with another brown man. And that, the minute I heard that, it was a red flag that I am just fulfilling his fetish for brown men. And I don't like that, you know, especially if you're white, don't fetishize me. So again, against my better judgment, I entertained him. Again, because he was effusive in his attraction to me, you know, very verbal about it. And so my ego played into it. And when it was the ghosting, it was, so going back to what I mentioned, was I used? The anger that I felt, the pain, but also
all right, Joash, sorry we got cut off for a moment. I just want to come back to this last story you were telling me about Ellie. And if I were to turn that story into a thought, it would be, I fulfilled his fetish for brown men and it backfired. You also said, I ignored the red flags. If I could ask a follow-up there, you know, was there part of you that ignored the red flags because you felt a bit of a power dynamic, or because he was a white guy? In your mind, sometimes in dating is like someone else's whiteness a bit seductive?
no. So to me, that's never been the case.
Okay.
I don't find lure in white men. I mean, while I've dated and sexed white men, it's not, I have not fallen into that trap of enslavement, if you want to call that.
Okay. So you don't feel
never,
trapped by that kind of internalized struggle. Okay.
no,
Look,
no. If anything, I prefer brown men to be very honest. So no,
Okay.
that's not
And
something. Yeah.
and so if you fell into this fetish and you ignored the red flags, um, what 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 does that mean? Or what does it say about you? If you fall for someone else's trap or you don't listen to your own gut, what does that say about you?
That I'm not as attuned to my inner thoughts as I thought I was, or that while I like to think that I don't operate from a place of ego, that clearly there are times when I do,
Mm,
and there's times when I get sucked into a trap of um, affirmation from people who don't mean anything. And you know that I'm not on social media. And one of the reasons why I took myself off of social media is I didn't like who I was when I got the attention from people. It kind of made me narcissistic, and I
mm.
didn't like that. I found myself seeking that validation of how many likes can this post get? How viral can this, or whatever it is. And I didn't like who I became as a result of social media. And this is exactly the same situation now that I'm thinking about it, that I found myself in, except it's
Mhm.
real world, it's not social media. It's with a human being that I had a connection with, not an unknown face behind a screen.
Okay. So I
And
tried to put,
mhm,
when I asked, like, what does this mean for you? Or what does it say about you? I got a couple of things, but I'm not sure if I captured it accurately. So help me here. Well, the first thing
yeah,
is I'm not as attuned to myself and people dynamics
mhm,
as I thought.
that's right.
And the other one is
As I thought.
affirmations from people are good for my ego. And I don't want to be at the mercy of others' likes.
Mhm. So
Is that
that's
accurate?
true. And so it is accurate. And so I can give you some more context to that. So I grew up as a fat kid, and that um, bled into my young adult life. I started to lose weight when I was a young adult.
Mhm.
And over the course of my adult life, my weight would fluctuate, as it still does to this day. And there's times where I'd be 10, 15 pounds heavier. And there's
Yeah.
times where I'll be 10, 15 pounds lighter. And immediately when I was heavier, the first question people would ask me, are you still going to gym? And I knew, for someone who does religiously go to gym, whether I'm fat or thin, I knew that was a subtle way of asking, or of saying, oh, you've gone fat. And so conversely, when people would say, oh, you've lost weight, you're looking so great, I would consciously distance myself from that association that my attractiveness is built into the size of my body.
Mm.
And that goes back directly to what you've just put down as that second thought bubble,
Yeah.
that while I have tried to consciously dissociate myself from people's perception of my level of attractiveness, I, honest to God, try to dissociate myself from that. I clearly do not within the context of dating.
Mm.
That I, to some extent, thrive on that. Whereas in social circles, I actively dissociate, but yet in a sexualized context, in a dating context, I'm clearly thriving on that.
So, in this context with Ellie, when you were
Mhm.
ghosted, was one of your thoughts about your body? Is that where your mind went? Like, is my body not thin enough or muscular enough?
Mhm. Yeah, not just body. It goes into all facets of who I am. So body would be one component of that. The other components are going back to what we mentioned earlier. Am I just too effeminate for him? Am I not brown enough for him? Because while I am a brown person, I'm not the most brown person out there in terms of cultural identity. He's more brown than I am, for crying out loud. I mean, he's follows Hindu religion and all of these fucking things that while I'm curious about it, I don't. I grew up Christian. I don't eat curry and biryani every day, while I do love it.
Does
So
he
it's
do
all
that?
these things. I think he does. I don't know. Who the fuck cares? But
I
he
mean,
was very much.
this is more than a red
very much.
flag. Somebody who eats biryani every day
Right.
is a red flag, sweetie.
I don't know, but he was like culturally a lot more brown than I was. That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. So
And he made
was
you feel
that,
for a moment
yeah.
not brown enough. Because like to be brown doesn't mean to be Hindu, right? But from the perspective of the white gaze, that is absolutely what brownness is. It's about, like images of gods and goddesses or higher beings. It's
Right.
ritual and all of this kind of stuff. So you're thinking, I'm not brown enough. So go stay with this for a moment. If you're not brown like other men, or you're not as into this idea of culture, then what does that say about you?
Is that he may not see me as being authentic. He may see me as being what other people would.
And does that mean that you, for a moment, worry that you're not authentic enough or you're not connected enough to your identity?
I don't. I mean,
no.
So, I don't feel that, but I feel that may be his perception.
Okay.
Because I'm comfortable with my level of cultural identity. I am not by any stretch of the imagination ashamed of my culture. I truly embrace it. But do I bathe in it in all its glory every moment of every day? Hell no.
Well, yeah. So if I got this right, you're thinking I'm not brown enough. And it's a reminder that people might think I'm not connected to my culture, and that puts them off. And coming back to my body isn't thin enough or good enough. Were there any other thoughts that were associated to your body? So I know that there's a visual memory and image of like the fat kid and people responding or giving you compliments about weight loss, and you don't like that. Did this person ever comment on your body in that way?
He did. He was actually very positive about my body. He says, "Oh, I can see you work out." And and that was something again that I got sucked into. I got sucked into the ego play that was there, the affirmations that he gave me. And again, I consciously tried to not allow myself to do that, but clearly I did within this context.
Okay.
And so going back to those feelings, it's that feeling of anger and maybe despair that I am not as elevated as I thought in my thinking, that I'm not as evolved as I thought in my thinking, or in my self-acceptance.
So let's make the distinction here. When you say evolved in your self-acceptance or in your thinking, in what way? What do you mean by evolved? Like, I don't love myself as much as I thought I did?
To an extent.
Okay.
So let me give you this context. I've always I've had to make peace with my body in my 30s. If I didn't, I would have just been a crazy hot mess if I did not. So I
Mhm.
have made peace with my body and the journey and trajectory that I've been on through weight loss and weight gain over the years. Um, and so I would like to think that at this point in time that I am fulfilled in what my body is, flaws and all. I genuinely do feel that way. So let me
Good.
preface. I genuinely do feel that way. But then there's also the part of me rather that feels my body, as much as I am self-accepting of my body, does not fit into what the culture, the gay culture,
Yes.
validates and accepts.
Yeah. Okay. So, um, when you say my body isn't thin enough or good enough, like that's one of the thoughts. I get that you've gone through a process of self-acceptance, but you're also saying
Mhm.
here that it's not thin enough or good enough for gay culture. Is that right?
Mhm. For gay
And
culture, yeah. For the dating
okay,
gay culture.
so
Because let's be honest, social media has also done a good thing, which is say that we should preach body positivity, body neutrality, that our bodies are our bodies and we should all embrace and accept, which is a great thing. But that is something that is a social media trend. Does it translate
yes,
into the hearts and minds of what actually transpires in actions on dating apps? I don't think so.
okay. Um, So give me a moment here. What you're saying, if we were to bring that into into this situation, is that this guy maybe lied to me about being into my body. Is that what
Maybe.
you're
I don't
thinking?
know. Mhm.
Okay. And when you think your body isn't good enough for gay culture, one of the implications is that, like, okay, so this guy lied to me. And if he lied to you, or if your body isn't good enough for gay culture, what's one of the long term consequences of that? Or is there a fear associated with that?
So the fear for me is that you'll never fit into or you'll never find happiness. Yeah, like I said, I'm relationship oriented. So if I don't fit into the textbook definition of what a gay man should look like, then my chances diminish at
Okay.
finding someone
Okay.
a
So you're
suitable
thinking,
partner.
based on what you told us before, where you have this larger belief that physical attraction sparks a connection, and then that connection gets sustained with emotional and mental connection later on. So,
Mhm.
you know, if your body isn't thin enough or good enough for gay culture, what you're saying here is that there are fewer opportunities for sparking
Yeah,
with other gay men.
right.
And if I were to take that further, like in a moment of despair or in a moment where you're feeling quite dire, you might say, I'll never find happiness. That's like the underlying
Mhm.
fear.
Mhm.
Um, okay, let's pause here for a moment. I'm gonna go back to a couple of the thoughts that we've already put down here. What we have been doing is we've been enumerating what I would call your automatic thoughts. Now, because you had four feelings that had a rating of 10, another four that had a rating of 8, right? We're working with 8 feelings that are quite prominent. So even if it feels, like this column is taking a long time, or you might feel, sometimes people feel a bit frustrated because they're not sure where it's going. That's completely normal because we're working with a number of emotions. And with those emotions, we've got a lot of thoughts. So now it's my job to ask you some follow-up questions. I want to distill these thoughts into something that's a bit more basic or something that's helping to drive a lot of the difficult feelings. So When you say I allowed myself to get into the situation despite my better judgment, is the like, if I were to ask you, what does that mean? Is that again about you not being attuned as you thought?
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. It is about that. It's also,
And
it's about not trusting my instinct.
okay. So, and your instinct. Now, this is tricky because your instinct was about physical attraction, was it not?
Mhm.
Or
It
was
was.
your instinct, was the red flag that I'm not physically attracted to him, so I shouldn't go further? Or was your instinct that he fetishizes brown men, so I shouldn't take it, I shouldn't pursue it?
It's both of those. And I ignored
Okay.
both those things. Mhm.
Okay. And when you didn't listen to those things, what is it? There's a reason you did it. You know, what were you, why did you want to put them aside? You were hoping that what would happen?
So the reason I put them aside is because the banter, the conversation, the chemistry, and the spark were all there. And so I thought, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And so what if his previous partner was brown? Um, you know, and if that's his thing, then that's his thing. But this is like a really nice guy that I'm having a great time with. Surely he deserves to have a chance, or he deserves to be to be part of my experience.
Hmm. So he deserves to have a chance. And you started building up an image in your mind about what your future could be like together.
Mhm.
Tell me
Mhm.
just a little bit about that. Where did you picture yourself? Like grocery shopping together, more dates, having a home together? How far did your mind go?
So a life together, a life as in um, a committed relationship, which comes with all the accoutrement of what a committed relationship is, like weekends away and being part of each other's social circles and um, cohabiting, or if not cohabiting, staying over at each other's place on a weekend, those kinds of things.
Mhm. Okay. Um, so I thought we'd have a life together. Commitment, trips, what my friend Alanis Morissette calls flavors of entanglement. There's you've romanticized that, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
when you were ghosted, you realize that that's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And if that isn't going to happen with this person who is so like they're throwing themselves at you, um, what does this mean to you, or how did you try to make sense of that? Is that when you started to think I'll never find happiness?
No. So I wouldn't say that I'd never find happiness. It's just
I'm
that
not saying
it's
you believe that. I'm saying, is that where your
mhm.
mind went?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it
Because your
is.
pragmatic side and your resilient side is quite strong, and that's good,
Mhm.
but that acts as a barrier to getting some of these other thoughts. Because to say that I'll never find happiness and to admit that that went through your mind might make you feel a bit exposed or embarrassed, right? Because you're this
Yeah,
pragmatic, resilient person. How could you think that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And that is true. Yeah.
Um, so when I look at your thoughts. These are the automatic thoughts that are connected to the feelings. I allowed myself to get into the situation despite my better judgment. Well, what does this mean or say about me? I'm not as attuned to myself and people dynamics as I thought. The other thought is I fulfilled his fetish for brown men and it backfired. I ignored the red flags. So part of this is like he deserves a chance and we could have a life together. And if we go into that a bit deeper, it's not about him deserving a chance. It's about I thought we'd have a life together. Commitment trips, the flavors of entanglement, and the consequence is I'll never find happiness. There's this thing about not wanting to be at the mercy of other people's likes, but I'm not seeing that as that's part of the puzzle, but not particularly. It's kind of a standalone, I think, unless it's part of the deception. So I'll ask you here, when you accept or lean into people's praise and affirmation, is there a negative consequence of that? Do you feel like you've been weakened by that in some way?
Yeah, I would say weakened. I mean, that's a great way in which you've described it. But it's like I am placing my happiness, my contentment, and my fulfillment of who I am in the hands of others. That's what that's about. And so I would never want to allow someone else to control my level of joy and happiness and fulfillment through their validation, especially if it's random strangers or someone that's fleeting.
Well, this person maybe feels random or fleeting in retrospect, but at the time he didn't, right? In your mind's eye, you had built a life with him. And and I think this is a hard balance where how do you not place your contentment in someone else's hands? How can you be completely self-reliant if your end game, as you say, is around relationships? So one of your thoughts, like as we distill this, is that I've been weakened in some way by placing contentment in someone else's hands. There's also this imagery and memory around the fat kid and people's responses to weight loss. I'm going to remove that only because that was helpful to get our mind going. But the thought there was my body isn't thin enough or good enough for gay culture. And what does this mean? What does this say? What does this tell us? That maybe this guy lied to me about being into my body. And if my body isn't good enough, then there's going to be fewer opportunities for the spark with other gay men. And again, we circle back to I'll never find happiness. And from what you've told me, when someone else thinks you're not brown enough or not connected enough to your culture, it doesn't really bother you. So this guy might have thought that and you're like, whatever, who cares? So my question to you, Joash, is which of these thoughts would you identify as your hot thought? Meaning the one that is most salient, the one that's most prominent, that's driving a lot of the difficult feelings, whether they are confused, rejected, or deceived, infuriated, sad, or despair. You're likely going to pick one of the ones that has an arrow next to it, because those are the ones that I've distilled a bit, but not necessarily. So what stands out to you? Take a moment.
In the context of ghosting, being ghosted by him?
On that, yes. On the Wednesday after date 2, when you discover the radio silence, you feel deceived, rejected, confused, determined, infuriated, angry, despair, and sad.
Yeah, I'll never find happiness.
Okay.
And then that really is because I go back to the thought that I'm going to die alone on my couch and no one's going to find me for weeks on end. Yeah,
Well,
so I'll
look,
never
I've
find.
seen your couch and it's a very good couch. And I know that
I'm
doesn't bring you
fancy
any
about
comfort in this moment,
it.
because we enjoy couches when we're alive, of course. So look, one of your automatic thoughts here and your hot thought is I'll never find happiness. Now, we're going to go through a short process of evaluating this thought. What is some evidence you have in your dating and relationship life that supports the idea that you'll never find happiness? Because it comes
So
from
been dating
somewhere. Say that
I've
again.
been dating. I've been dating for 3.5 years, and I've not been able to have something sustained beyond 2, maybe 3 dates. And when I have had it beyond 3 dates, it was highly dysfunctional, and I knew it immediately. And so I curtailed it as soon as I could. But yeah, a lot of that is based on my current experience that I've been single for a period of time, and there has been no tangible indication, while other people have been single for far less time than I have, and they have went on to merrily find their version of happiness.
Mm.
So you kind of resign yourself to, oh, maybe it's not going to happen for me.
So when you see other people who have found significant relationships with a shorter interval in between, is there somebody you're thinking about in particular? Like you could just say my friend
Mhm.
with this initial.
Mhm. Yeah. So a friend, and also, my ex went on to have 2 significant relationships after me. And it's like, what the hell's wrong with me? I thought I was a decent person. I'm kind of cute, but clearly not measuring up to what people are. I don't know. So yeah, that's
Mm.
where my mind goes.
Um, Look, I'm going to come back to the automatic thoughts actually, because you said something right now that made me think that perhaps I'll never find happiness is a belief you have, or it's a scary belief you have. If we were to add to that, is it I'll never find, if you were to say I'll never find happiness because, how would you finish that sentence?
Um, because I don't meet the expectations of what people want in a relationship.
And what do they want that you don't have or that you think you don't have?
Someone who is more masculine, because I'm the furthest away from that. Someone who is has a more perfect body, because I'm, again, furthest away from that. Someone who is
Okay. So when you say
yeah,
this idea of the perfect body, is this like the Adonis physique you're talking about? Like the broad shoulders,
mhm,
small waist, big butt?
yeah,
Okay. So
yeah.
look, I think we've added a bit of meat to this automatic thought here. So I'll never find happiness because I'm not masculine enough and don't have the Adonis physique. Okay.
Mhm.
How does it feel for you to have that in bold letters in front of you? I kind of noticed your affect and your tone shift a little bit. Um, how are you feeling as we identify that more specifically?
You know, the thing is, it is who I am. And so if someone doesn't accept that, it's not going to change.
That's not what I'm
So
asking. Joash, you're protecting yourself, and I appreciate that. I'm not going to ask you to comment on it further. Rather, what I will say is I noticed a shift in just how you were speaking when we put
Mhm.
this out there. Okay. So, all
Yeah.
that to say is that it hits a difficult and vulnerable space for you. We know that, if somebody else isn't into you, of course, they're the ones missing out. We know that. That's not the immediate thing that goes through your mind. That's not what makes up
Yeah.
the despair and sadness. Okay, let's go back
Mhm.
to evidence that supports this hot thought that you'll never find happiness because you're not masculine enough or don't have the Adonis physique. Where else do you get evidence that supports that? So, your friend and your ex, are they more masculine? Do they have that physique?
Mhm. They do.
Which one? Are they both more masculine?
Oh yeah, both of them are. Yeah.
And they both have like a similar physique, or
Mhm. They both do.
what does that look like? What are we talking about? Muscles or abs
Oh yeah,
or
yeah.
all of these
All of it.
things?
Yeah. I mean, if you had to look up a picture of Adonis physique, both of them are those images.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, okay. So your friend and your ex, they've had significant relationships with smaller intervals.
Mhm.
You've been single for 3.5 years. It's been difficult to go beyond date 2 or 3. And both your friend and your ex, they're more masculine than you, and
Mhm.
they've got this muscular physique. So I see how that, um, I see how this comes to shape the belief. Is there any other evidence? Like, for example, has someone told you that they would date you if you were more masculine or had a different physique?
I wouldn't say they've said it directly, but you hear the nuances in the language
Give
that
me an
it intimates.
example.
Um, so someone in relation to you say, "Oh, I'm not really into camp men," um, or you're cute, but you're just too femme, or whatever the case is.
Oh, people have said that to you.
Mhm.
So they'll say you're too femme or too camp. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Um, let's go to the other column. Now, this one is a bit harder, but just as important.
Mhm.
So, what is evidence you have that doesn't support this idea that you'll never find happiness because you're not masculine enough or don't have the Adonis physique? So, some evidence from your life that happiness is possible and that people like your masculinity is enough or your physique is enough.
Mhm. Um, I was in a relationship for 13 years with someone who loved me, whom I loved. And so that is the evidence that supports
Mhm.
that I've had it before and that I will have it again.
Okay. And he was an Adonis, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I just want to
Yeah.
put that in
Mhm.
there. And have you been on dates where people appreciated your feminist or your campiness? Or where
Yeah.
people did
Mhm.
tell me a specific time. Are there many times or was it a few specific people?
Um, it's been many times. Because so the funny thing is I like camp men. I find camp men attractive. So
Well,
I
yeah.
don't. yeah, I don't like hypermasculine men. I just think they're so boring. So I've been with guys who are camp, and they appreciate my campness. And so a specific example, yeah, I was dating someone who loved, we again, it was just like one or two dates that we went on, who thought that my sense of style was really interesting and was fun. And so he liked that about me. And my sense of style is anything but heteronormative. And the same person was also very much in love with my body,
Ah.
everything about my body. And so he validated me on many levels.
And so this is, you've been with a couple of guys then, I think, from what I've heard, that are really are in love with your body, including the guy who
Mhm.
ghosted you, right?
Including the fucking guy who ghosted me.
Okay. Now, take a deep breath with me. Um, we're going to move over to the next column, which is the alternative thought. Now, alternative thoughts are not positive affirmations. A positive affirmation would be, everything happens for a reason. One day I'll meet the person of my dreams. I don't subscribe to that because I don't think that it speaks to your experience and what you're talking about here. Alternative thoughts are going to be alternatives to what we have in bold here that says, I'll never find happiness because I'm not masculine enough and I don't have the Adonis physique. So given that we've gone through the evidence for and against, what might an alternative thought be? Something that's more accurate and a bit more helpful.
Is that I will continue to have a very adventurous and fun dating life.
Okay. And is there happiness in that?
There is happiness in that, yes, but it's fleeting happiness and it's situational happiness.
Okay. And so, okay, situational and fleeting. What if I call that short periods of happiness? So instead of saying I will, I'm going to say I can have short periods of happiness. Would you say, and that could be okay? Or are you not ready to say that?
No, it is okay because again, going back to how I like to frame things, it's that I have had a pretty fun time the past 3.5 years. So it's not like I'm sitting here depressed, but while the outcome is that I would like a relationship, I've had some really fun experiences that have given me short periods of happiness. It's just that beyond those couple of interactions, I would really like to get beyond that.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
So when people ghost me, I should remind myself that, well, how would you finish that sentence?
That I need to kiss 1,000 toads before I find a prince.
Yes, that, okay. And because that is about, not about what you're lacking, it's about the process. Okay. Okay, so when people ghost me, I should remind myself that it's not about something I'm lacking, but rather the process. Kiss 1,000 toads. You also said, that you really want to get past date 2 and 3. And when that doesn't happen and you're ghosted after date 2 or 3, what's a helpful thing to remind yourself of or to tell yourself?
Is
So
that firstly, and I don't think
if I don't get past date 2 or 3,
that I'm
finish the
also
sentence.
part of the culture. That I'm also part of the culture, and I don't think this is something we spoke about in this session, but we're part of this culture where you're a face in a sea of faces. You're a face in a gallery of faces, and so very often we become disposable when you're in that gallery of faces, because you simply move on to the next. And so I'm very much aware of that. And as I said, we didn't speak about that in this session, but I'm also aware of how that dating culture plays out in real life.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So if I don't get past date 2 or 3, it's often because of the culture of being disposable in a sea of options.
Rahim, hold on for me. I've got someone at my door. Is that okay?
No problem. Totally okay. Go ahead. All right. So here are our alternative thoughts. I will continue to have an adventurous dating life. I can have short periods of happiness. When people ghost me, it's not about something I'm lacking, but rather the process. If I don't get past date 2 or 3, it's often because of the culture of being disposable in a sea of options. Now, you've also been comparing yourself to your ex and your friend. So I think you've got to put something in your alternative thought that captures that. So while other people have more relationships, I don't know. I don't know what the alternative thought is here. Help me out. Because
So the alternative thought is that there's someone for everyone. As much as people aspire to the ideal of masculine Adonis-like bodies, there's other people who embrace differences. And so I may not be the benchmark, but not everyone likes vanilla.
yes, totally. So there are many guys who embrace people like me. Okay. Are there any other alternative thoughts that you think would be helpful to add there?
That life as a single person can be just as fulfilling.
So life as a single person can be fulfilling. Now, it's a tricky one, right? Because you don't want to place your contentment in someone else's hands, which says, I can satisfy all my needs. But you've also got the fantasy that with these flavors of entanglement. So I think one of the thoughts here, alternative thoughts, is it's hard to open up to the idea of another person when I'm often working on being self-reliant.
This is
Does,
true. Mhm.
so that doesn't have to be an alternative thought, but I think that might even have been your initial automatic thought, but I just thought I'd put it in
Mhm.
there so you have it
Yeah.
when we're done. I'm just going to make this a bit smaller so it all fits on one page. All right. Joash, as you um, I'm going to ask that you read through these alternative thoughts and meditate on them a little bit. And by meditate, I just mean, which one do you think brings you most comfort, or do you believe in the most when you think about your situation on that Wednesday after date 2?
So having gone through this exercise, if I was in that situation again, how would I
Which would,
rank these?
well, you don't have to rank each one. I want you
Mhm.
to see if you can pick one that you, it's an alternative thought you actually believe in, and that would bring you the most comfort. So for example, you mentioned, it was kind of in passing, you said, I think that there's someone for everyone. But I also know that you don't
Mhm.
completely think that, because you also said that you can live a fulfilling life as a single person. So this is
Mhm.
about which thought brings you most comfort in your life, and which thought you
Mhm.
believe in most. So is it, I will continue to have an adventurous dating life. I can have short periods of
Yeah.
happiness. Life as a single person can be fulfilling too. When people ghost me, it's not about something I'm lacking, but rather the process. If I don't get past date 2 or 3, it's because of the culture of being disposable in a sea of options. There are many guys who do embrace guys like me. It's hard to open up to the idea of another person when I'm often working on being self-reliant.
It's the first one. I'll continue having an adventurous dating life. That's
Okay.
the predominant alternative thought that
And does
comes
that bring
to.
you, when you've been ghosted, does that bring you comfort?
Oh yeah. Mhm.
It does. So
That, yeah,
why is that?
it does, yeah.
Because if you have an adventurous dating
Because
life, what does that mean, or what does that say about you?
is that there's hope, and
Mm,
that while this has been hard, it's been painful, and it's not the outcome I wanted,
mhm,
I'll figure it out again. And I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to allow myself to be in a situation where I could be ghosted once more.
mhm,
But I'll always allow myself to be vulnerable. I'll always put myself out there in the hope of, in the search of something more fulfilling, or something not even more fulfilling, because I have a fulfilled life right now, something that is going to bring a new dimension to my life.
mm. And okay, so I will continue to have an adventurous dating life. Um, and that's the exciting dimension of your relationship life. Is that right?
Mhm. That's right.
And are you saying a dating life, there's hope that it will eventually turn into something long term? Or are you saying that
Mhm.
whether I continue to be single or date somebody long term, I could be happy with both? I'm just trying to figure out what you're reminding yourself here.
That it is both. That while I do want a relationship, I still really enjoy the whole dating culture that I'm in right now.
Mhm,
And it's something that gives me fun experiences, fun stories, but also exposes me to some really great people. In fact, people who've become some of my closest friends. So these dating experiences have not resulted in naught. They have given me other avenues of deep fulfillment and joy. And if it doesn't work out with someone, it will work out eventually. And if it doesn't work out in the way that I want to in terms of a relationship, it's going to add different textures to my life.
Mm-hmm. And is there something you want to tell yourself about being deceived and rejected that is also more comforting?
I don't think there's anything comforting about being deceived, but I think the comforting thing about being rejected is that you're never going to please 100% of people 100% of time. And I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Mhm.
So based on what we've just said, so there's I will continue to have an adventurous dating life. That is true. You believe in that. I enumerated that a bit because I think that in a context when somebody's like grieving and feeling very sad, that might be hard to conjure up. More likely is this following statement. Tell me what you think about this. I can want a long-term relationship and continue to enjoy dating life. Dating also teaches me new things, and it's fair to be upset about feeling deceived.
Mhm.
Does that speak to you? Does that capture what
Oh,
you've just
yeah.
been saying? Okay. I'm going to
Mhm.
put that in bold. Now, when you read that alternative thought, I want you to think about, conjure up the feeling of being ghosted. We've all been there, right? It's painful. Tell yourself, I want a long-term relationship and I continue to enjoy dating life. Dating teaches me new things. And it's fair to be upset right now about being deceived.
Mhm.
Does the intensity of being deceived, how would you rate it? We're going back to your original feelings and we're rating them now. We're re-rating them. So don't look at what you rated them
Mhm.
before. In this moment, when you meditate on the alternative thought, how do you rate the intensity of these feelings?
So deceived is still high up there because
Is it
that's
still a
just
10?
not an okay. Yeah.
Good. How about rejected?
I'm okay with being rejected. So I would put that as being a 5 or a 6,
Okay. How about
or rather a
confused?
4 or a 5. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Confused?
I would say that's still high. So
Yeah,
8, because again, the notion of ghosting is that you're not given the opportunity to understand the context.
absolutely. And how determined do you feel?
Oh, still a 10, honey.
And infuriated?
Um, I'd probably say maybe about a 7.
Okay. And anger at
Also
yourself?
about a 7.
Okay.
Because again,
Despair?
the context of ghosting is you just don't know why. Despair, yeah, like 4.
Okay. And sadness?
Also a 4.
Okay. Vengefulness? I'll show him.
Yeah, probably less vengeful because, again, going back to one of the points lower down on the alternative thoughts list, we know that this is part of our culture. So I would say maybe a 5.
Yes.
Mhm.
And your level of frustration?
Well, this is still high for me, because being ghosted is a frustrating thing, especially when there's been positive indicators. So I'd still put this at about a 6 or a 7.
Okay. How about feeling used?
Mm, about 4.
Unworthy,
I would put that at 4 as well.
mhm. Inadequate,
4.
and embarrassed.
I would put that at 3.
All right. Are there any new feelings that are emerging for you?
Hopeful.
Yeah. Anything else?
Um, I'm trying to say adventurous.
Uh,
I don't know if you can say that's a feeling, but a sense of wonder.
mhm, mhm. I'll put down adventurous. Is that okay for sense
Mhm.
of wonder?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I also wonder if you feel a
Optimistic.
bit, oh, okay, yeah, hopeful, optimistic.
Mhm.
That's good. Um, I wonder if you uh, are feeling a bit of like when the anger goes down or dials down a bit. And I know you rated it similarly, but when it dials down a bit, sometimes there's more room for grief and sadness. So I'm a bit surprised that your
Mhm.
sadness rating went down. I kind of
Mhm.
suspected that your anger rating would go down and your sadness rating would go up because you had built a
Mhm.
life in your mind with this person. So I wonder if
Mhm.
the feeling here is either like mourning and grief or it's self-compassion, right? Because there's a loss, but there's also self-compassion for having the dream.
Yeah, so I tend to be a realist optimist. And so I think I'm always going to find, firstly, the hope of any situation. And so in that situation, the hope was there's something that can be built here. And now, when I look at the alternative thought, the hope then comes in with
Mm,
I could recreate this, or not necessarily recreate, but I can find this with someone who is worthy of me and whom I'm worthy of too.
mm.
And so that's why the sadness has diminished, because I see that I'm able to remain hopeful,
Yes.
to be
And
optimistic.
and you said
Mhm,
something very important here. So, when somebody ghosts you, it makes you feel unworthy. But you're somebody who has said, I would prefer a conversation about the ending because I don't mind being rejected. Right. So to
right.
me, it sounds like you might be feeling a bit righteous in your integrity, or you might actually be feeling worthy. You're actually, it's not about how unworthy
Mhm,
do I feel, but there's a sense of like worthiness and confidence in your integrity. How would you rate, like
mhm.
if I said like, how worthy do you feel next to this person who short-sightedly ghosted you?
Yeah, so I know I'm worthy of many things.
Yeah,
So I would rate my worthiness high. I would put that
good.
as a 9 or a 10 even. Mhm.
Okay. And then is there a kind of righteousness?
Um, I would say so. I would
Okay.
say that, I do feel that. Mhm.
Okay. All right. I'm going to leave it there because we're adding new feelings, and that's good.
Mhm.
So, by the time we get to the end of a thought record, right, adding new feelings can be helpful because it means that, we've gone from the difficulty of identifying basic emotions in a situation and expanding to creating space for so many more. So you began by saying, you were deceived, rejected, confused, determined, infuriated, angry, despair, sadness. You had vengefulness, frustration, feeling used, unworthy, inadequate, and embarrassed, in that order. And now I've grouped them a bit differently in terms of similarity, right? So give me 1 second here. So we've got deceived and rejected, and rejected's gone from 10 to a 5. Deceived has stayed the same, but that's fine because in your alternative thought, you've said that it's fair to be upset about feeling deceived or about being deceived. Your level of determination is good, but your resentment and your vengefulness has gone down. You've discovered not just that you're not unworthy, but that you are worthy. You're optimistic, adventurous, hopeful, and you've got a bit of righteousness, which is healthy. You're infuriated, frustrated, angry, confused at a similar level that you were before, but your sense of feeling used has gone down. Your sense of being confused has gone down a bit. Because remember, in the process of the alternative thoughts, you've changed the attributions. You've said it has something to do with our culture. It has something to do with the grinder grid, all of this.
Yeah.
And then your feelings of despair, sadness, and unworthiness went down quite a bit. And inadequate and embarrassed went down just a touch. Have a look at this thought record and just tell me, what are some of your overall reflections? What have you gained? What does it feel like to go through this process?
So this has articulated things that I've felt, but not paid attention to. I mean, I've not introspected at this level to know that, that I still have difficulties with my body, and how that manifests itself in the relationships, dating situations that I find myself in. And how that then impacts the outcomes that I'm having.
Yeah.
And so that is what this has really brought to light. And I mean, I've known that subconsciously, but I've not known that in this way where it gives me some kind of searchlight to make a tangible change.
Yeah. And you know what really stood out to me, Joash? Like it's striking and mind-blowing to some degree that in your mind, you've got this formula. You have this core belief that people spark with physical attraction and then they build something deeper. And forgive me if this is an overstep or, I've gone too far, but it seems to me like you've built a lot of your gym routine and emphasis on gym around being able to provide the initial physical attraction so that something deeper can be built. But you discovered with this person, Ellie, that there wasn't a physical spark to begin with, and the other things could be built. So I think there's a larger takeaway here that the formula might be different for different people, right? So it's not always about the physical spark first and then something else. I think we maybe, Ellie has taught us, right? You said people teach you things. So I think Ellie has taught us that the formula can be disrupted or altered sometimes.
Yeah.
Joash, I'm going to leave it. Oh, yeah. Great. Joash, I'm going to thank you for being a guest on the CBT Dive. I think your insights are going to be quite helpful for other listeners. And I just want to appreciate, you being here and being vulnerable. Maybe we'll see you again. But thank you for going through this process. Take care.
Thank you, Rahim. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the CBT Dive. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at thecbtdive.ca. You can also listen on the go, wherever you get your podcasts. To follow Raheem on social media, check out ladyativan.com. See you soon.